Being a source of evil in A Song of Ice and Fire is not an easy role to define. When it comes to storytelling devices in high fantasy novels, having a main antagonist is almost inevitable. The primary function of an antagonist is to complicate the protagonist's journey. Whatever the protagonist desires, it will not be easy for them to achieve it, particularly because the antagonist stands in their way. Their natural lust for power is often used to disrupt the natural order of things and create chaos in their world. At first glance, the others seem to have that role in A Song of Ice and Fire, the primary evil that tries to destabilize the realm. However, George R.R. Martin often emphasizes that good and evil are subjective, and he avoids one-dimensional characters. The others, although terrifying, might not be evil for the sake of it. There is so much more depth to them in the books compared to the show. As they have not been seen for 6,000 to 8,000 years, they were considered extinct, and some even believe they were merely part of legends. However, their recent appearance raises more questions than one might realize at first glance. The origin of the White Walkers is one of the biggest mysteries in the books. While their origin is revealed in the show, it remains a mystery in the books. However, there are some interesting clues in the novels that hint that their origin might be similar to the show, but much more complex, especially concerning magic and world building. In 2012, when asked whether there was a closer relationship between the others and the Children of the Forest than previously suggested, Martin replied that it was possible and that the topic would be explored later in the story. This suggests that the connection between the Children of the Forest and the others is significant. Martin somewhat confirmed this in A Dance with Dragons, The Wayward Bride, where he revealed a tale about the Children of the Forest and their battles with the First Men, when the Greenseers turned the trees into warriors. However, according to legends, the first appearance of the others did not occur during the skirmish between the First Men and the Children of the Forest, but rather during the Age of Heroes, which took place after the two races agreed to peacefully coexist by signing the Pact of the Isle of Faces, granting the open lands to humanity and the forests to the children, who had been greatly diminished. It seems that the creation of the others happened during this period, but chronologically it doesn't make much sense, as they were created during a time of apparent peace between the Children of the Forest and the First Men. Nevertheless, the possibility of the Children of the Forest creating the others is still strong. It feels plausible that a certain group of children who felt the treaty with the First Men was unfair might have created them. After all, the First Men received nearly the entire continent, while the children only retained the deep forests. There might have been some among the children who hated the treaty and sought revenge against the First Men, resulting in the creation of the others. However, this creation might have spiraled out of control, eventually backfiring on them. It would explain how the children seem to contradict the others so perfectly. However, I'm not particularly fond of the idea that the others were created by the children to be used against the First Men, as it makes them seem too shallow and one-dimensional, not to mention the several inaccuracies and loopholes this idea presents. I feel the others are their own species, just like the Children of the Forest and the giants who inhabited the lands of always winter. Although the Children of the Forest seem deeply connected to the old gods, I believe the others have an even stronger connection to the old gods and the weirwood trees. One of the biggest hints about this connection is found in the very first chapter of A Game of Thrones, the prologue. This chapter, one of the most confusing and mysterious, reveals more about the others than one might realize at first glance. Firstly, the woods are emphasized when describing the others. "Who goes there?" Will heard uncertainty in the challenge. He stopped climbing. He listened. He watched. The woods gave an answer. The rustle of leaves, the icy rush of the stream, a distant hoot of a snow owl. The others made no sound. Will saw movement from the corner of his eye, pale shapes gliding through the wood. He turned his head, glimpsed a white shadow in the darkness. Then it was gone. Branches stirred gently in the wind, scratching at one another with wooden fingers. This eerie connection between the others and the woods makes me think that the others could be a personification of the weirwood trees. Besides this connection, we also learn more about the others' personalities in this chapter. The Watchers moved forward together as if some signal had been given. Swords rose and fell, all in a deathly silence. It was cold butchery. The pale blade sliced through ringmail as if it were silk. Will closed his eyes. Far beneath him, he heard their voices and laughter sharp as icicles. The other initiates the fight without backing down. Waymar's blade is described as becoming coated with frost until it shatters. It appears the other's weapons don't simply shatter steel in one blow. Instead, they freeze it until the steel breaks. The others show no clear reason for attacking. It seems more like pure sport. They test Waymar, deeming him inferior and amusing. The 5 others do not interfere until Waymar's sword shatters. They simply watch, making no comments or noises. If they were on a massacre, they would not have behaved this way. This makes me think that this encounter was some sort of initiation or test, similar to how some tribal cultures have a test of manhood involving hunting. They act as if they received a signal, probably the sword shattering, and all move in to stab Waymar to death. Interestingly, they laugh, making this event seem like a game. It's as if watching the pathetic creature fight is a form of amusement to them. Their laughter and behavior are extremely human traits, something George R.R. Martin emphasized from the start. The children of the forest never laugh, which makes me believe that the others are not just weapons created by the children to be used against the first men. Instead, they seem to be their own species who resided in the lands of Always Winter. However, since there is so much contradictory information about them, I wouldn't be surprised if this assumption turns out to be far from the truth when their true origin is finally revealed. According to legend, the first time the others appeared was during the Long Night. They emerged from the northernmost parts of Westeros, the polar regions of the lands of Always Winter. Wielding razor-thin swords of ice and raising wights to fight the living, the children of the forest and their allies, the First Men, fought valiantly against them but were pushed southwards. The others were finally halted when it was discovered that dragonglass weapons could kill them. Northern legends claim that the last hero made contact with the children, and the first members of the Night's Watch drove the others back during the battle for the dawn. To ensure people would never be caught off guard by an invasion from the north again, Bran the Builder supposedly raised the wall, an imposing structure of solid ice and magic that stretched 100 leagues from the gorge in the west to the shivering sea in the east, cutting off the lands of Always Winter from the rest of Westeros. The Night's Watch guarded the wall and protected the people from threats beyond it. It is even said that the enmity between houses Stark and Bolton dates back to the Long Night. The phenomenon of the Long Night is very mysterious. The more we learn about that incident, the more questions arise. One of the biggest challenges I find in understanding it is the fact that we have a similar legend from the easternmost location of the known world. They have their own version of the Long Night and the last hero. According to Yi legends, the blood betrayal began the Long Night. The Maiden Maid of Light turned her back on the world, and the Lion of Night emerged in his wrath to punish the wickedness of men. Some say that the 5 forts were built by the Pearl Emperor to guard against the Lion of Night and his demons. How long the darkness lasted, no one can say, but all agree that it was only when a great warrior, known variously as Herkun the Hero, Azor Ahai, Yin Tar, Nefarian, and Eldrick Shadow Chaser, arose to inspire courage in mankind and led the virtuous into battle with his blazing sword Lightbringer, that the darkness was finally vanquished and light and love returned to the world. As we can see, the legends from Westeros and Yi are remarkably similar. Azor Ahai from Essos closely resembles the last hero from Westeros, while the Lion of Night and his demons in Essos bear a striking resemblance to the others from Westeros. The Ivgivron, or Woodwalkers, a mythical race said to have inhabited the dense forest of northern Essos, are also reminiscent of the Children of the Forest. Their name in the Dothraki language of those who walk in the woods, according to the account of merchant adventurer Brian of Oldtown, makes them appear almost identical to the Children of the Forest. It even seems that the 5 forts and the wall served a similar purpose, to protect their respective realms from the Long Night. These peculiar connections lead many to believe that the Land of Always Winter and the Great Waste might be interconnected. This connection would bring a sense of balance to the world of ice and fire, with Valyria and the 14 Flames being the epicenter of fire magic, while the land between the wall and the 5 forts could represent the heart of ice magic. It also makes sense since George R.R. Martin confirmed that his world is round, so traveling west of Westeros would logically lead you to Essos eventually. Interestingly, we find tales of the Long Night throughout Essos except in its southern part, where the Valyrian Peninsula is located. They have their own version of the Long Night, the Doom of Valyria. These two events have more in common than it might first seem. They are directly compared in the World of Ice and Fire book. The world has known ice in the Long Night, and it has known fire in the Doom. The two incidents parallel each other almost perfectly. Firstly, the lands of endless summer and the lands of always winter are direct counterparts. Both places are mysterious and dangerous. The lands of endless summer, a fiery grave for Valyria, and the lands of always winter, an icy wasteland speculated to be the home of the others. Despite being seemingly uninhabitable, magical creatures thrive in both. The doom of Valyria serves as a lesson in hubris and the consequences of ice and fire failing to come together. The original Long Night was won through the combined forces of the First Men and the Children of the Forest, defended with dragonglass and the wall built by Bran the Builder. The Valyrians, on the other hand, saw themselves as gods, and when fire began to burn brighter, they were too proud to extinguish it. Both the Long Night and the Doom of Valyria may be the doings of their gods. Before these two catastrophes, Valyria and Westeros were in chaotic states. Westeros was torn apart by constant wars between 100 kingdoms, while Valyria saw similar conflicts between its own houses. However, unlike the Doom, the Long Night had a different outcome for Westeros. We may not fully understand what caused or happened during the Long Night, but we have more knowledge about its aftermath. Ultimately, regardless of what caused the Long Night, how it ended, or to whom we give the glory, the Long Night resulted in a massive consolidation of power. In the wake of the Long Night, powerful dynasties like the Grey Irons, the Durantons, the Gardeners, and the Lannisters, though tales suggest the Lannisters rose as kings of the Rock by swindling Casterly Rock from House Casterly rather than by building it, all of these emerged. House Stark was the one that came out on top. From many relatively evenly matched petty kingdoms arose relative superpowers. Thus, they, the Starks, were the ones most able to take advantage of the momentum in driving the others back. They were the ones who were able to build the wall, or allied with the Children of the Forest to build the wall. They were the ones who claimed the central location of Winterfell. They seemingly took advantage of treaties from the Storm King in helping construct Storm's End, and with the King of the High Tower who helped them build structures allowing them to reap whatever benefits came from that. The Kings of Winter rode that momentum through the Age of Heroes. The Starks did what wolves do. They hunted. Another important thing to note about Westeros during this time is that all the major houses and kingdoms, aside from those in the Iron Islands, kept the religion of the old gods and were thus overseen by the Children of the Forest and their green seers. While we don't know how well the pact was upheld both before and after the Long Night, though tales suggest the Children of the Forest were hard to find by the time the Long Night occurred, we do know that God's Woods with heart trees were maintained throughout Westeros to oversee pacts, treaties, oaths, marriages, and personal prayers, particularly among powerful families. This relative peace continued until the invasion of the Andals, when we know the Storm Kings and the Children of the Forest formed the Weirwood Alliance to keep the Andals at bay. However, only the Kingdom of the North was able to repel the Andals and fully retain the religion of the Old Gods. Though we're delving into later history, it wasn't until the threat of the Andals that the Starks managed to get the Boltons to bend the knee. Once again, an invasion and war unified the North, and war against the Andals finally gave House Stark full dominion. However, the connection between the Starks, the Long Night, and the others may run deeper than it initially seems. Why was House Stark the victor in the North and not another house? Was it magic-resistant blood? The valor of the last hero? Divine intervention? The geographical location of their stronghold? Or simply luck? The same way the Targaryens discovered they could control dragons and, to some extent, the fire that comes with them, calling themselves the blood of the dragon, the Stark family came to a similar conclusion several thousand years later. The Starks, being the self-proclaimed royal family descended from the First Men, the oldest humans known in Westeros, are known to possess certain magical properties, or at least their founder did, which we are not yet familiar with. They can endure cold weather, though they are not completely immune to it. Like the Targaryens, they can withstand harsh temperatures more easily than other humans. They have the ability to warg and are green seers, but not all Starks can warg or see visions, just as not all Targaryens can hatch dragons. They are deeply connected to the North and the Weirwoods, as we have seen through Bran. Moreover, as demonstrated by nearly all of the Stark children, they have prophetic dreams, much like some Targaryens do. The fact that almost all Stark children seem to possess magical abilities, something that even they find unusual, raises the possibility that old magic is somehow returning, unlocking their hidden powers, much like how Daenerys may have been able to hatch dragons after so many years. To summarize, Starks are slightly different from the average human. They can withstand colder temperatures, control animals, or shapeshift depending on how you view it, merge with werewoods, see the past, present, and future, and have prophetic dreams, distinct from Greensight. We must also consider the two most important structures in the north, the Wall and Winterfell. We already know how mysterious the Wall is, created by ancient ice magic and hiding many secrets yet to be uncovered. Winterfell, built around the same time and allegedly by the same person, is equally mysterious, though it is not presented as such. It is the Stark residence, surprisingly warm despite its location, and it lies near the Wall for a reason, concealing several mysteries. One such mystery is the snowstorm emanating from the castle in the 5th book. At first, this may not seem mysterious, but upon closer inspection, it becomes more intriguing. There was no snowstorm between the Wall and Winterfell or anywhere around the castle, suggesting that the storm was radiating from within the castle itself, perhaps as a defensive mechanism due to the absence of a Stark in Winterfell. Perhaps Winterfell, like the Wall, was built with magical properties and contains a contingency plan that activates when the Starks face terrible danger and the castle is lost or abandoned. There's also the saying, there must always be a Stark in Winterfell, yet we are conveniently not told why, just as we don't know why the Starks have manned the Wall for thousands of years. Additionally, Benjen Stark vanishes mysteriously and Jon Snow takes his place at the Wall. We still don't know why Benjen joined the Night's Watch. Initially, this doesn't seem like a big deal, but the more we think about it, the less sense it makes. According to George R.R. Martin, Benjen joined the Night's Watch just months after Eddard returned to the north, leaving House Stark reduced to just Ned, Benjen, his infant nephew, and his brother's bastard. If something happened to Ned or his sons, House Stark would be left without an heir. Benjen's decision seems harsh, and just as there must always be a Stark in Winterfell, there must also always be one at the Wall. The connection between the Starks and these two magical structures, built using ancient ice magic, could explain this. Winter is coming is a phrase we've heard countless times, and it is perhaps the most cryptic house motto, seemingly unrelated to the larger picture. But it doesn't just mean that harsh times are approaching. It also means the Starks are coming. Just as Hear Me Roar warns against crossing the Lannisters, or Growing Strong describes the Tyrells, Winter is Coming hints at the Stark connection to the north and whatever lies beyond. The fact that we are told so little doesn't make it any less true. Littlefinger taught us this lesson. The less people know about you, the better. Keep your enemies confused. History is written by the victors, and what truly happened on that fateful day may remain lost. This could be one of Westeros' best-kept secrets passed down through generations of Starks, a secret that fell into oblivion for the sake of maintaining its secrecy, perhaps due to Lord Rickard's untimely death. Think of the Starks as guardians, akin to the Illuminati, tasked with protecting a secret inscribed in runes, possibly stored in the crypts of Winterfell, passed down exclusively to Winterfell's lords. With the secret lost when Lord Rickard was executed in King's Landing, it now seems recoverable only through Bran's green-seeing, or Jon Snow's resurrection and the fulfillment of his prophetic dreams of walking into the crypts. This parallels the Targaryen prophecy of Aegon's dream, which was passed down through his descendants but was lost during the Dance of the Dragons. This resemblance strengthens the connection between Starks and Targaryens. The link between the White Walkers and the Starks is hinted at in the first book of A Song of Ice and Fire. There is a reason the saga begins with the others reappearing after thousands of years, and the Starks stumbling upon a pack of 6 direwolves, one for each Stark child south of the Wall. A rare occurrence. The number 6 is interesting when it comes to the Starks and the others. Just as we saw 6 direwolves, we saw exactly 6 others in the prologue. This suggests a connection between these two seemingly separate factions. The motto "Winter is coming" serves not only as a warning but also as a threat. It could also relate to an ancient pact between the Starks and the others. The Starks have a long history of resolving conflicts through marriage alliances, such as the one with the Warg King, which involved marrying off his daughters. Could a similar arrangement have occurred with the others? Perhaps a marriage alliance with the White Walkers made the Starks the kings of winter and led to the creation of the Wall. The legend of the Night's King, a Stark, adds credibility to this theory. The Night's King's story is intriguing. He lived during the Age of Heroes not long after the Wall was completed. He was the brother of Brandon the Breaker, king in the north, and served as the 13th Lord Commander of the Night's Watch. He fell in love with a woman with skin as white as the moon and eyes like blue stars. She was cold as ice, but he pursued and loved her, giving her his seed and his soul. Together, they ruled the Night Fort for 13 years, committing horrific atrocities until Brandon and Joramun joined forces to defeat him. After his fall, all records of the Night's King were destroyed, and his name was erased from history. This legend raises many questions. While the Night's King supposedly lived during the Age of Heroes, this seems contradictory since he commanded the Wall, which was built after the Long Night. It's likely he lived long after the Age of Heroes, but his connection to the others made people associate him with that era. Brandon the Breaker and Joramun also remain mysterious figures. Joramun wielded the Horn of Winter, a magical horn believed to be capable of bringing down the Wall. This horn is reminiscent of the Dragon Horn, which can control dragons, fire magic balanced with ice magic. Brandon the Breaker, who earned his epithet by breaking the Night's King's reign, might also have broken a pact between the Starks and the others. If such a pact existed, it may have involved sacrifices to the others, with the Night's King adhering to its terms rather than practicing dark sorcery. Brandon's alliance with Joramun and the use of the Horn of Winter may have scared the others into retreating. This theory would explain the obliteration of records about the Night's King and why Brandon earned his title as a Breaker. Perhaps Brandon broke the ice magic binding the Night's Watch to the Night's King. Whatever Brandon and Joramun did was effective, as the others vanished and became a myth. However, with their recent return, things have changed. Regarding when the others began their regression, we don't know for certain. The show suggests man started gathering the wildlings for southern migration about 20 years before, but we can't take that as gospel. We have good reason to believe that the free folk felt an immediate and impending threat that required them to migrate south, which occurred before the actual return of dragons, before the fall of the Starks in Winterfell, and before the Red Comet most recently appeared. The last major wildling invasion before our story was by the king beyond the Wall Raymond Redbeard around 72 years before, which was seemingly due to the dwindling Night's Watch. So the return of the others as a threat likely occurred after that, as Mans had to unite the wildlings again. Therefore, the others didn't start coming back after the Hardhome tragedy 600 years ago, which involved fire in the books, or when dragons came to Westeros with Aegon the Conqueror 300 years ago, or when the Night Fort and Snowgate were abandoned during the reign of the good Queen Alysanne. They started coming back at some point in the last 72 years. So, what awoke them? The timeline suggests that the return of the others coincides with Bloodraven's disappearance. They did not re-emerge during any major events prior to that. All the significant events of the past 72 years, including those that might concern them, occurred after Bloodraven took the Weirwood throne. Additionally, considering that we know Craster and the others had an arrangement where he supplied them with children, the timeline also aligns with Bloodraven's disappearance 48 years ago and the apparent age of Craster. If Bloodraven saw the White Walkers gathering while he was Lord Commander, you'd think he would have sent word to Aegon V, but Aegon seemed focused on bringing back dragons for reforms benefiting the small folk with no apparent warning about the others. Moreover, although the others are inherently hostile and ominous, we must remember they stayed on their side of the wall for thousands of years. Neither men nor dragons seem to have provoked them south before. There's no historical evidence of expansionist tendencies among the White Walkers after their initial pact. Their aggression began during Bloodraven's time as the last Greenseer. So, how did he instigate this? One theory is that Bloodraven, as the three-eyed crow, may have threatened the others with prophetic dreams, just as mankind was receiving warnings of the others' return. Dragons, being essentially weapons of mass destruction against White Walkers, could also have played a role. The plot to wed a Targaryen into the Stark family, bringing dragon blood into the north, might have seemed like an imminent threat to the others. They may have feared that the return of dragons could destroy them, leading to their aggression. Though it's possible mankind unintentionally violated some pact with the others, perhaps involving child sacrifices, it's undeniable that the children of the forest played a role in ending the long night the first time. Based on the way blood magic seems to work and the sacrifices made to the werewoods, there may be significant power in the werewoods. George R.R. Martin may be using the children of the forest as a personification of the earth itself, suggesting that nature, or the old gods, brings winter and the apocalypse. However, there is another possibility besides Bloodraven. In this case, nature might play a much bigger part in their reappearance than the three-eyed raven himself. Seasons in the world of Westeros are very confusing. In 2005, someone asked George R.R. Martin why the seasons are so messed up. Martin said he couldn't give an answer because that would be telling. He did say that there would eventually be an answer in one of the books, and the answer would be a fantasy-based explanation, as opposed to a scientific one. Here's what the world of Ice and Fire has to say about this topic. Though the Citadel has long sought to learn the manner by which it may predict the length and change of seasons, all efforts have been confounded. Septon Barth appeared to argue in a fragmentary treatise that the inconstancy of the seasons was a matter of magical art rather than trustworthy knowledge. Maester Nichols' The Measure of the Days, otherwise a laudable work containing much of use, seems influenced by this argument. Based on his work on the movement of stars in the firmament, Nicholl argues unconvincingly that the seasons might once have been of a regular length, determined solely by the way the globe faces the sun in its heavenly course. The notion behind it seems true enough, that the lengthening and shortening of days, if more regular, would have led to more regular seasons, but he could find no evidence that such was ever the case beyond the most ancient of tales. As we can see, unnatural seasons are a feature of Planetos, likely connected to ancient magic, and the reason behind it seems relevant to the plot. This is probably why Martin avoided answering the question. I am quite sure that by the end of A Dream of Spring, if it ever comes out, after the long night is concluded, the seasons in Westeros will return to normal. There won't be winters that span generations anymore. However, I'm unsure if that will mean the total erasure of the others. This raises a final question about them. How will they be dealt with? What could be the solution to the problem of the others? In most fantasy literature, the others, or White Walkers, would be depicted as simple antagonists, evil creatures bent on the destruction of humanity. However, Martin's world is morally complex, and he often avoids the binary good versus evil that is typical of traditional fantasy. There's reason to believe that the others may have their own motivations, history, and culture which the human characters do not fully understand. I do not think there will be one big final battle between good and evil, since Martin tries to avoid that kind of trope, but I still feel there will definitely be a battle between the others and the humans. The three most important characters in the battle are likely to be Bran as Greenseer, Jon as the prince that was promised, and Daenerys as Azor Ahai. Bran's abilities allow him to tap into the ancient werewood network and possibly access memories of the distant past, including the origins of the others. Through Bran's powers, the human characters might learn more about what drives the others and how they can be reasoned with, rather than simply fought and destroyed. I strongly believe that, like the children of the forest, the others have some connection to the werewood trees and the ancient magic of Westeros. Bran, as a Greenseer, could use this connection to communicate with the others in a way no one else can. This could lead to the discovery that the others are not simply monsters, but beings with their own history, motivations, and grievances that can be addressed. Bran may also be able to influence events in the present or even the past, as hinted by his time-traveling abilities in A Dance with Dragons, and through this he could potentially stop the cycle of violence between the others and humanity. If Bran understands the true nature of the others and their connection to the broader balance of the world, he might be the key to achieving a peaceful resolution. Jon Snow, with his Stark and possibly Targaryen blood, represents the duality of ice and fire. His potential role as the prince that was promised could go beyond simply leading armies against the others. Instead, Jon might serve as a bridge between two worlds, between the living and the dead, between humans and the others. His resurrection by Melisandre further positions him as someone who could straddle the line between life and death, which could be crucial in resolving the conflict peacefully. His character seems to follow this path. He was able to peacefully coexist first with the Night's Watch, then with the Wildlings, who, like the others, were initially seen as antagonists. I feel the others may not be an exception either. Daenerys, with her dragons, represents the extreme force of fire. While dragons may be necessary to hold back the others' advance, they might not be the ultimate solution. Instead, her dragons could serve as a catalyst for a deeper understanding of the balance between ice and fire. Daenerys herself might need to realize that conquest by fire won't bring lasting peace and could be forced to reckon with the others in a different way, possibly by aligning with Jon or Bran to find a diplomatic or magical solution. Just as the first men and the children of the forest forged a pact to end their wars, a similar agreement might be reached between humanity and the others. This could involve restoring some kind of balance to the land, perhaps even a ritual or magical act that requires both parties to come to terms. The idea of such a truce would reflect Martin's interest in history as cycles of conflict and resolution. While a truce is possible, it may require major sacrifice, perhaps from Jon, Daenerys, or Bran. If the original creation of the others involved blood magic or a sacrificial act, as seen with the Children of the Forest creating them in Game of Thrones, undoing their threat might require a similar, though more peaceful, act of balance. This could involve the symbolic or literal sacrifice of someone like Jon or Daenerys to restore cosmic order. One of the key themes in Martin's work is the idea of breaking destructive cycles, whether it's the cycle of revenge and feuding between noble houses or the cycle of war and conquest. Many of his characters like Jon, Daenerys, and Tyrion grapple with whether they can change history or are doomed to repeat it. The others might represent the ultimate cycle to break, not through violence, but through understanding and reconciliation. The idea that the others might be defeated through negotiation or a truce rather than brute force aligns with the themes of A Song of Ice and Fire, which often explores the gray areas between morality and history. The others, as a force of ice and death, might have their own reasons for re-emerging, and their defeat could involve restoring balance to the world rather than annihilating them. Bran's magical connection to the Weirwoods, Jon's dual heritage as a Stark and potentially a Targaryen, and Daenerys' dragons all might play a role in achieving this deeper, more peaceful resolution where the Song of Ice and Fire is not one of destruction, but of balance and harmony.